How's everybody doing today? This is Pete here at Spawn Fly Fish, and we are going to tie what has been called the Shaggy Sculpin. And if you want to know why the Shaggy Sculpin, I'm going to show you. Here we have Senyo Shaggy Dub, and we have black, we have tan, and we have medium brown. I know it seems like, why, a little crazy to use 3 colors, but once we get into this, you're gonna see why. So in the vise, we've got the Ahrex SA 280, and this is a size 6. For the thread, we have some Uni 6/0 in black. Get rid of this tag end here. So what I've done is I've taken some of all 3 colors of that Shaggy Dub and made a nice little pile. And if you want to know exact numbers for the tail section here that we're about to put on, I'd say 5 to 6 strands of each color is more than enough. As we get back here on this shank, you see how it just starts to climb down on the curve. That's where I want to end my thread, and that's where we're going to end the tail, and then that'll leave us the entire flat portion of that shank for our next material. And so for this Shaggy Dub, I'm just going to fold it over itself around the thread there, and as I come up to the hook shank, now I can just tie it down where I need that, and it gives you a lot more control, especially when you're dealing with rubbery, latexy looking materials like this. They can get unruly pretty quickly. So that's all it takes, and she's tied in. I'll come back down one more time, a couple wraps, and here we have the never sitting still type of tail that fish are going to love. So for the tail portion of this articulated sculpin, we are going to use some rabbit. 1, 2, 3 times around that, and we've got our loop cinched down, and come back one more time to prevent that from moving anywhere. And now our thread can just come up to the hook eye. Let's open this up a little bit. So as you look at a strip of rabbit off the hide, and this is sand variant, if you look at the end of those strips, you'll notice that the length of fibers are just a little bit shorter, and that's perfect for the taper we're going to build. So on this rear portion or hook portion of this fly, I'm going to use some of that shorter part that if you're spinning hair a lot, that tends to get tossed out, but that's actually perfect for what we're going to do. Well, let me show you one more time if I'm able here. Fumble, save. All right. Let's get that back in there. And what I want to show you is we're not going to use even the full length of these hairs. So before I get this out, I'm going to just tug on the leather just a little bit, and you can see there's not a lot of hair sticking out, maybe half of the length of these guys. So once you've got that positioned where you want it, go ahead and remove the leather side like so, and spin it up. I think it's more fun to whistle while you're spinning these things, but that's up to you. Our little Swiss CDC brush, get any of those loose fibers out, and we're ready to rock. All we're going to do is before every wrap, we're going to slightly bring those fibers back like so, so that as we wrap this forward, all those fibers are flowing back, and it's going to give us the movement and the look the fish require. And as far as how much do you need for this hook, it's roughly 1.5 inches of a rabbit strip, and it should end right about there. And now bring this up, and in that little V between the body and the thread, we are going to make 3 wraps. There's 3. We'll pop our spinning tool out, and now bring that loop back over itself and get a couple good wraps secure it down. Now it cannot slip out and undo all that pretty body you just made. Remove that tag end and we're ready for a couple whip finishes here. There's one. And two whip finishes. Thread gets cut. And just a small kiss of some Loon hard head clear will seal up all that thread. Try not to get any of that into that rabbit. And that is our tail section. Got one little fiber there, but I don't think anybody's going to get too hurt about that. All right, nothing crazy. Hope everybody's with me so far. So now for the second part, we have a spawn jig shank 60 degree, and this is the 20mm. And if you notice on the end there, we've got the 7.5mm black spawn football bead, and that is tungsten, and it does get down. And the reason I like this full 7.5mm on this fly is that even though we've taken the rabbit off the leather and when we spun it in a loop and put it on, rabbit takes a long time to saturate and fully get wet. And now real quick before I go on, I'm just going to bring a rubber band and boom, this hook no longer presents an issue. But what I was saying before, you know, put some weight on this because it's going to take a while to get that rabbit fully saturated and wet, and then it'll slowly pull down. But if you know, we really don't want to wait too long for that. So a couple things you can do: make your fly heavier from the get-go, which I'm a big fan. And also, before you toss a streamer that's not going to sit on top, make sure you get it wet and then start casting. So let's trim this wire out. This is some 0.015 non-lead weighted wire. Around that cut edge a little, and then keeping the beefy portion of that bead toward the bottom. I'm going to slip that wire in there, push all the way up, and get that bead to sit right where we want. And now if you want, you can wrap more wire back so that it meets up with the arm. It's really not too big a deal if it doesn't. Cut that out and round this wire over. You can see I could have used some 0.020 instead to really block that, but as I get in here and tie those wire wraps down with the thread, it will keep this bead up here where it's supposed to be. Get that thread started behind your wire wraps and then trim the tag. And now we'll get this arm tied down and secure those wire wraps. So there's our arm. Couple passes back and forth, really secure that arm down. And now we're getting to the wire wraps, so I'm going to use my thumb, kind of keep that bead up here a little bit where it's supposed to be as I get some wraps here. And, well, still wants to jump a little, but once we got the material and the rest of our fly tied on here, it'll fill in a little bit and hold that bead right where we want it. You can see it's already getting to a fill spot here, so a couple little tweaks and let's get this fly going. All right, so for now we're going to make the same loop that we did with the rabbit, but we only want it to come up to roughly where we still have, let's say, another bead length behind this that we leave open. So again, it's going to be roughly 1.5 inches or so of hair that we slip into this loop. And bring that up. Come back, secure that knot, and get the thread up here. Bingo. So let's open that. Now, all I did for the next section of rabbit hair that's going to go into this is after the end, which had the shorter fibers, and then we just follow that with the next little section. Pop that in your loop. Make sure all the fibers are in there. Get your tool in. Give a little tension. And let me slide this all the way up. And then I'll show you once again, we are not going to utilize all the length of this. We want it just barely longer than what we used on that hook portion. And this is already longer. I like the look of it, and I'm going to cut the other side out, which has the leather or hide. And voila, and we spin. Don't forget to whistle. It makes a difference. Be glad I'm not whistling, because then you'd have to mute it and miss everything. So brush out, remove any loose fibers. A couple extra spins just to make sure everything stays tight. And now we'll grab and start to wrap. So every time you come up to the top, just grab those and slick them back. And what happens is you begin to kind of train the material that's inside of that loop, and you can see it's overlapped just enough to cover up the connection that we made with the hook to the shank. And one last wrap there, and now we can tie this off. I'm going to bring my thread back a couple wraps and try to keep all that hair moving back as much as possible. And one key to remember is if your fingertips are wet, that hair gets slicked back and they're not moving anywhere. You don't have to worry about excess hair in your coffee or any of that good stuff. Trim out the tag end of that loop after you've tied it back down. All right, so now the real fun begins. While I was making the little accumulation of shaggy dub for the tail, I made 2 more little piles. And so as you see here, this is number 1. And we're going to tie this on either side of the hook shank. So the side that's nearest me will have one chunk, and the side that's nearest you will have another chunk. And this will replicate those very large pectoral fins that are so noticeable on sculpins. And so all I'm going to do here is find a roughly middle spot of that clump and tie it in a couple times right down the middle, move those fibers back, get a wrap or 2 in front, move the fibers forward and get a wrap or 2 behind them right where they want to kiss that rabbit. And so as you can see, we've got this V of all these rubber legs or vinyl, except it's not going to exactly mimic anything except a fin that is just constantly moving. And fish love anything that's got to keep moving. They're gonna give it their full attention. And so now on your side, and I do have the vise tilted so that I can see this a little better. I'm sorry. I'll show you here in a second. Get a couple good wraps, so now you can see it's right down the middle. I'll bring all those fibers back a little bit. If I can get my hands to, there we go. Wraps in front, and then bring these guys forward and separate from the hair. Just get one wrap in there, and it's gonna make the next step just slightly easier. So a little wiggle and it's right through. Now let's turn this upside down. I want one more wrap right down the middle again. And so for our last element, and you can tie this in before the legs, but honestly it's not going to make too much difference. But this is a strip of pine squirrel dyed brown. This is from Nature Spirit. And you can see I've cut out a little bit of the fur or hair right there at the end of the strip. So I'm going to get a couple wraps on there. And again, just wiggle that thread and it'll get through all that rubber leg material, no issue. And once you've gotten a few solid wraps, bring them all back. And now we're looking at just the leather again of that squirrel. A couple more tie downs and trim out the butt section of that. And now finish tying down. So as you can see, it gets a little congested in this fly, but after a couple times of tying it, train your fingers, say, hey, this is what we got to do today. And they'll work with you. All right, so at this point, I do want one wrap of this squirrel to come behind all these rubber legs. Now, having said that, if some of these rubber legs get trapped, all it's going to do is spread all this lovely movement around the front portion of that fly. So if ever there's a fly where mistakes work in your favor, this is it. But just try to get one wrap now in the middle of our clumps. And now you can see as I bring everything back, you should have room for one full wrap and then a partial wrap of that squirrel, maybe 2 good wraps, and that's it. And now what we've done is filled it in. We've also given it contrast toward the front so that the dark portion near the head and then lighter as it goes back is going to look very natural to all those fish. And I'm going to finish this on the bottom. I'm going to get a tie off one wrap. Now I can get rid of that. You can see what I'm doing. Pull up as you're pulling down on the thread and it seats it in there. And now we'll move it back and finish wrapping everything in the front. A few good wraps. Let's get rid of the remainder of that squirrel, like so. And now we just need to whip finish a couple times, a little head cement, and go fishing. So first whip finish, and let's do one more. Nothing to it. Trim that thread out of there. And we're good to go. So I'm going to undo this rubber band now and slowly turn this so you can see we have a pretty buggy, hairy looking mess. And now I'm going to take it out of the vise and show you a vertical profile. So now you can see where that shaggy dub material sticks out the side there. We've got a little underneath, just a couple fibers on the top, but on that tail, ooh-wee, is it gonna move and wiggle. And good luck getting this thing to sit still. All right, and there we have the Shaggy Sculpin. I really appreciate you guys watching these videos. And again, if you want to see anything different or whatever the case, please let us know in the comments below. And as always, please remember to hit like and subscribe, and we will see you on the water.